The United Nations Global Principles for Information Integrity, Recommendations for Multi-Stakeholder Action. And the reason that we are doing this is because information integrity is the new branding word for censorship. Information integrity, as you guys may have heard me talk about many times, means creating a cartel for control over information by saying that information can be chopped into two different categories depending on the integrity of the information, whether it's true or false, whether it's good information, like what the New York Times prints, or misinformation. And those two categories are high integrity news, high integrity social media accounts, or low integrity news and low information in social media, low integrity social media accounts. And information integrity is the brand phrase for creating that censorship blacklist, that whitelist, blacklist, graylist system, where high integrity information gets whitelisted and you're allowed to post it or share it or monetize it. Anything that's against Trump is high integrity. Low integrity, like what the plebs say, like what populists, like what nationalists, like what pro-Trump people say, that's low integrity. So information integrity just means censorship. And integrity is a big branding word for them. The Election Integrity Partnership, for example, the censorship vehicle for the 2020 election. The Transition Integrity Project, for example, which was the vehicle for planning rental riots in case Trump won the 2020 election. The Integrity Initiative, the plan to censor the literally global cabal with cluster cells in every NATO country to censor the internet after the Crimea annexation and referendum vote in 2014. That involved everything from Nina Jankowicz to Ann Applebaum to Ben Nimmo, the works. So recently, the UN put out a global principles for information integrity. And last stream, we mentioned this in brief because global principles, if you remember, the SEPS program showed that this is exactly how they codify, how they use rule of law programs to codify laws from these USAID funded rule of law program judge networks. They start by getting 50, 100, 200 NGOs to sign a letter announcing their global principles that announce the norms and standards. And they get the judges and their legislatures to pass laws and judicial precedents that codify those norms and standards and the global principles into law. You guys remember that from last stream? We went over that whole thing with the SEPS program, and they gave examples about how to get a rule of law predicate for censorship laws. Well, here's the UN one. Let me tell you why this is interesting. I posted this clip on X a couple months ago. This is Imran Ahmed. This is the head of CCDH, the Center for Countering Digital Hate. They're the ones who did the disinformation dozen for nuking the 12 biggest influencers challenging the COVID orthodoxies, challenging vaccines. How they got them kicked off of Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all simultaneously. CCDH is a British intelligence operation. Its chairman was, I believe, Simon Clark, who was at the Atlantic Council with 7 CIA directors on its board. Annual funding from the Pentagon, State Department, USAID. They're the ones who ended up in the Twitter. If you guys remember this, Paul Thacker broke this in a great report. Their annual priorities, CCDH, was kill Musk's Twitter as their number one priority to their donors. This is the same British-based intelligence network around Christopher Steele and Richard Dearlove. When Musk got rid of the censorship, their plan was to kill Musk's Twitter, bankrupt the company, focus on advertising focus, trigger EU and UK regulatory action against disinformation, and progress towards change in USA and support for STAR. STAR is their framework. Let me show what I mean here. CCDH STAR framework for stopping misinformation. Okay. CCDH is global standard for regulating social media companies to stop free speech. STAR framework, a global standard for regulating social media. This is the CEO, Imran Ahmed. Platforms monetize content. So again, it's about killing the money. Data on the psychology of the users. So the whole thing is about stopping mis and disinformation on critical issues like COVID-19, climate change, and elections. So this is a British influence operation to censor your ability to challenge things like COVID-19, climate change orthodoxy, or election fraud. So here's the STAR framework. Safety by design, a preventative system approach to harm. So that's going to mean things like building in AI filters, the kind of stuff that NewsGuard supplies, the kind of stuff that the State Department advises on what the trending narratives are, and then the AI should go in to pre-censor it. Transparency, meaning that X has to give up their algorithms, their rules enforcement, meaning whether they're taking down the accounts that the blob wants them to take down. And transparency specifically related to advertising. So they have to give up their whole business model so that the blob knows how best to target them and press into their pain points. Accountability to accountability to democratic and independent bodies. Accountability means punishment by the government. So the government can punish them if they continue to monetize wrongthink accounts or don't censor who they're told to censor. And then responsibility for companies and their senior executives. Again, this whole thing is targeted at Elon Musk as a senior executive of X and Mark Zuckerberg as a senior executive of Facebook, for example. Final element is responsibility for social media and search engine companies for implementing duties under a legislative framework. So again, this is censorship laws that the UK is trying to impose on the US. Responsibility means consequences for actions and failure to act. So punishing the companies and their senior executives if they don't censor what this British intelligence outfit wants them to censor. And you'll see here, as we showed, progress towards change in USA and support for STAR. So this British intel op, just like with the Christopher Steele dossier, is trying to get this censorship law framework put in place in the United States. And you'll see here, U.S. policy engagement, set up meetings with Amy Klobuchar's team, the influential Democratic senator who ran for president against Joe Biden, if you remember. So they're working with U.S. senators to get support in Congress for censorship laws that blatantly violate the First Amendment of the United States. Well, now they've got Trump as president and a Republican majority in both the House and the Senate. So that avenue of attack for them has dried up. So they're moving up the chain to the United Nations. So imagine my shock when I find this video from just a couple months ago with Imran Ahmed, CEO of CCDH, telling the United Nations, it doesn't matter which policy issue is central to your concerns, internet censorship is the key to winning all of them. Here's what he says.
You know, it doesn't matter which policy issue is central to your concerns about the future. Fixing the disorder in our information ecosystem has become integral to the solution. If you care about climate, then you worry about a tidal wave of climate disinformation designed to undermine the scientific consensus astride which our ecosystem of analysis and solutions sits. If you care about gender inequality, then you worry about social media algorithms promoting misogyny and being hijacked by bad actors to spread disinformation about abortions. If you care about conflict resolution or peace or anti-Semitism or anti-LGBTQ+ hate, then you worry about polarization and the amplification of hate speech, which makes our societies feel less safe, more polarized, sclerotic, harder to cohere. So how is this happening? Well, look, good information is as vital to the body politic as good nutrition is to our physical bodies.
And that's why NewsGuard advertises itself as news nutrition labels. Okay, so understand what he's saying. He is surrounded by policymakers who don't really care about censorship. They care about their own issues. They care about a carbon tax. So that's what they're lobbying for. They care about abortion. They care about more funding for the Ukraine war. He's saying, listen, you guys should all support my censorship initiative, because no matter what your issue is, think about how helpful it would be if you could just censor the other side. And your narrative dominates because no one can oppose you. So this is like a big tent thing, guys. You don't have to care about any particular thing. You don't have to care about, you don't have to care. Free speech and censorship doesn't even have to be a part of your issue. No matter what issue you're trying to get done, this is a very powerful gun I'm giving you. If only you support my initiative to hand it to me. He's making a pitch to everyone, from the war industry to the vaccine industry to the climate change industry to the LGBT and identity group industry, saying we all need to come together, because every issue you can win by censoring the other side. And you'll see, actually, in this longer video, if you run it, he then has a panel discussion with people like Anne-Marie Slaughter from the State Department. I'm just going to read a couple things here, or play a little bit here.
Before Anne-Marie comes in, just really briefly on that, just to add, I mean, one of the calls to action in our UN Global Principles is also to PR companies and advertising companies, and that is, it's really hard to understand why they would advertise in these spaces, because they have through this programmatic advertising system, very little control of where their ads land. I know Imran's organization has tracked a lot of these ads and pointed out to big brands that they're appearing next to misogynist, hateful, anti-Semitic content, and yet but there is a growing movement to expose.
And anyone who challenges Ukraine funding, anyone who challenges climate change funding. Now this is, let me show you a little bit here. This panel is people like Anne-Marie Slaughter, Director of Policy Planning for the State Department. That's that interstitial node between state and CIA. That's who synchronizes State Department and CIA policy at the State Department. Jared Cohen was there, for example. George Kennan was there. And they're going after the advertisers. Now, she references this UN Global Principles thing, and I want to just go over this document, okay? Because they're going upstream, because now the ability to get this STAR framework introduced as a bill here in Congress is running dry. They're going upstream to an international body like the UN to get it done that way. And just so you see, they really were trying for this. Let me show you what I mean by this. Middleware NewsGuard. Let me show you this. Opinion. What I learned on my quest to fix America's social media problem. This is by Gordon Krovitz, the co-founder of NewsGuard. Co-founder, co-CEO of NewsGuard. And what he was saying is that NewsGuard, the social media and advertiser blacklist to kill the money in the private sector for any social media company or news site that supports or publishes or allows the publication of misinformation to drive them into bankruptcy. What he says is middleware. So that's basically putting companies like NewsGuard in the middle between the advertisers and the social media companies. Could be the solution to our tech woes, but Congress is going to have to force the internet companies to do it. We need a censorship law that compels, there's not a market for my product, my censorship product on its own. But if Congress can compel the social media companies to adopt a middleware model and then there's 7 or 8 different companies you can choose from to license your censorship blacklist from, then it can work. And this is what CCDH is trying to achieve at the legislative level. And you see them meeting with Amy Klobuchar and other high-level Democrats to make this happen. So let's look at these global principles. So again, they're doing the whole thing under this concept of information integrity. Information integrity. High integrity versus low integrity news information. That's what they're going. That's the way that they are justifying the murder. And to show you how this dovetails into other things, let me show you this. That was the name of the interagency working group in the Biden administration. My organization published this at FFO. It was called the White House Information Integrity Research and Development Working Group. So again, it's just operations, but they're calling it research, okay? Now, this interagency working group on information integrity, the same thing that the UN is calling its report, information integrity, had 26 agencies a part of it. Who were these agencies? 26 agencies all working on internet censorship. The CIA, you guys see this? The CIA was advising on information integrity. DHS, the Justice Department, the State Department, the FBI, DARPA, IARPA, the NIH, the National Science Foundation, the National Security Council, the NSA, USAID, and then you'll notice the same National Science Foundation funded censorship labs like Kate Starbird's University of Washington and Renee DiResta and Alex Stamos and Michael McFall's Stanford. On the outside, advised by ADL, Anchor Change, which is Katie Harbath's vehicle, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which is the Bill Burns CIA vehicle, the Integrity Institute, and NewsGuard. Okay? So this is very real. It's a very real threat that's coming now above the U.S. government. It's coming at the international level. The U.S. is a part of the UN. I want the U.S. ambassador to the UN to nuke this from orbit. It's supposed to be Elise Stefanik serving as U.S. ambassador, but it looks like it's been withdrawn. Interesting. But the U.S. ambassador to the UN has to get this thing killed, because this is absolutely insane. Look at this. Let's go to it. Okay. Information integrity and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So these are these SDGs that everyone talks about. We have to stop public figures, activists, scientists, and broadcasters from becoming targets of hate speech for their efforts to provide information. So basically, if you write a hit piece on any one of their assets, you get nuked under this. So it's all these jargon words that you guys have heard a million times: resilience, psychological resilience, digital resilience. And this includes principles that apply to governments, media, civil society organizations, the NGOs and universities, and for-profit corporations, including advertising and PR, to align with these principles. UN, UNESCO, UN Plan of Action, they got all these people on board. So here's their 5 principles, which again, they want to then use these principles that they're articulating and codify them into law with things like the EU Digital Services Act, the Digital Censorship Act, the UK Online Harms Bill, the UK censorship law, bringing the STAR framework to the US. Societal trust and resilience. So trust means trust the media, never question them. Resilience means be resilient against misinformation psychologically. Healthy incentives means controlling the money flows. Rewarding good censors and rewarding platforms that censor speech, and punishing, depriving of financing anyone who doesn't do that. And then, of course, government funding of media and funding the whole censorship army that uses the cloak of just doing research, even though we're taking stuff down. Advertisers, advertisers, advertisers. Here's who they want to protect. Activists, journalists. Think about that. Activists. You know, for every activist on one side of an issue, there's an activist on the other side of the issue. You think they're going to treat all activists the same? You think they're going to treat activists trying to promote paper ballots as activists by this definition? You think they're going to include anti-vaccine activists in the same way that they would treat pro-vaccine activists? No. They're picking winners and losers in every one of these. By journalists, do you think they mean Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger and Miranda Devine and James O'Keefe? No. It means their asset ones. Scientists, medical professionals. Let's get to the advertising. I want to get more to the advertising. Healthy incentives. Healthy. It's unhealthy to allow you to make money. Creating healthy incentives involves addressing the critical implications for information ecosystem integrity. All that gobbledygook. Again, that just means bankrupting anyone who doesn't censor First Amendment protected speech, which depend on targeted advertising and other forms of content monetization as the dominant means of revenue generation. So they're coming for the revenue, the UN. These models have provided unprecedented growth opportunities for businesses of all sizes. Great. Let's keep it going. What's wrong? Oh, you guys are losing politically. So that's why you need to stop this thing that allowed unprecedented growth for social media companies. Oh, because you're losing elections. And because people don't believe your bullshit anymore. Oh, I guess we need to stop global growth then. Have given rise to a creator economy powered by and benefiting countless people. That's the problem. It's too many people, including bad people. These models have enabled financial incentives and opportunities for purveyors of disinformation who exploit the attention economy. You mean they just publish what's on their mind? Feeding algorithms and prioritizing engagement in a bid to maximize potential revenue for advertisers and creators. Messaging designed to polarize. Oh, you mean have a different opinion? A different opinion than you, though, right? That's the problem. And produce strong emotions. Oh, my God. There's never clickbait in the Washington Post or the New York Times. MSNBC never tries to generate strong emotions. Actors exploiting these business models. You're no longer a human posting your opinion. You are a cyber threat actor. Include information manipulators and mainstream public relations firms contracted by states, political figures, and private sector entities. The technology sector has designed digital advertising processes to be complex and opaque with minimal human oversight. Yeah, that's what makes it egalitarian. This is advantageous to many actors in the ad tech supply chain, with large technology companies profiting most of all. Such opaque design can lead to advertising budgets inadvertently funding individuals, entities, or ideas that advertisers might not have intended to support. Or maybe they would support it if they didn't fear blowback from the fucking UN coalition cracking down on their company if they allow advertising that promotes like a political candidate that the UN doesn't want to rise to power. And that's what this is about. The handful of companies who dominate ad tech are responsible for implementing ad standards on their own platforms. But enforcement can be patchy and inconsistent. They don't censor, they don't demonetize every single person we want them to. That's a problem. Such erosion of information integrity highlights the need for a fundamental shift in incentive structures. This is the same shit they were doing in 2017. If you remember, we went over the D4 video, Defending Democracy from Digital Disinformation, when the fucking CIA, Chris Walker at the National Down for Democracy, and Michael Chertoff cornered Google and Facebook in the room and told them they need to fundamentally re-engineer the economics of the news industry to stop pro-Trump voices from rising. Because unfiltered alternative news gives rise to populism, don't you know? So it's about coercing the advertisers. That's how you kill Musk's Twitter, as we saw CCDH demand. Now let's get into the more specifics. And, one second. Advertise. Okay. For tech companies, change your policies on advertising. Reevaluate business models. Get away from the advertisers. Establish independent oversight. Commission regular external human rights independent audits, which cover terms of service and community standards, trust and safety in advertising policies, the impact of advertising across operational contexts, as well as content moderation. Enforce advertising policies. Establish, publicize, and enforce clear and robust policies on advertising and the monetization of content. Review publisher and advertising tech partnerships on an ongoing basis to see whether such policies are upheld by partners in the ad tech supply chain. So they want the whole supply chain. The supply side of the advertiser exchanges, the demand side of the advertiser exchanges, the social media company, output and distribution, and the social media accounts as to whether they're monetized. Every link in the chain they want controlled. And then tell us where it's all going so we know how to put pressure on the appropriate links in the chain. Establish recommendations. Establish human rights responsible advertising. Establish safeguards to ensure that advertising does not drive risks to information spaces. Advertise with media and outlets that bolster information integrity, including public interest journalism through messages such as inclusion and exclusion lists. And there it is. Ad verification tools and manual vetting. Require ad tech companies to publish criteria that a channel or website must adhere to before they are able to monetize. And only give the advertising dollars to media outlets and platforms that bolster information integrity, that are high information integrity news sources. Basically, the exact same thing that we saw with GEC. What they want is a final state that looks exactly like what the Global Engagement Center was working hard to do. Inclusion and exclusion lists. You guys see that? Inclusion and exclusion lists for advertising, and only advertise with media outlets and platforms that are good for information integrity. And here is your Global Engagement Center. Inclusion list, NPR, New York Times, Washington Post, and exclusion list. Daily Wire, The Blaze, OAN, Newsmax. This has got to be addressed at the UN level. The U.S. ambassador to the EU, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, the U.S. ambassador to NATO, all of it. Because they know control of the money supply is what drives incentives at the corporate level. That's why they all hate me, because I'm unplugging their government money supply. But they're going a step beyond that. They're trying to unplug, because none of us are funded by the government. None of us are getting government grants and contracts. They were subsidized. They were super boosted. But they don't even want us to be able to finance each other based on what we like. They want to step into the private sector. That way, X goes bankrupt. It kills Musk's Twitter if he allows accounts like mine or yours or anyone who's pro-populist to be monetized. So this is a UN plot in motion to do this. Look at this, form coalitions. Advertising and content monitoring. Require data through audits of advertising. Obligate transparency so that we know exactly how to micro-target your weaknesses. Look at this, 60 times in a 40-page document, 60 times in a 40-page document. The whole thing is about control over the money supply.